Welcome to the Whitetail Watch produced by Hoyt's Bow Hunting Whitetails. Today is the 6th of December and I'm looking ahead to the weekend of the 9th and the 10th. But first I want to talk about what we've been seeing. I haven't been hunting. It's the firearm season here in Iowa. It came in on Saturday. So I've been taking a little break, getting back to the office and doing some paperwork and that sort of thing. But I have talked to people who are out hunting, and apparently from what I hear, overall the success rate has been fairly low in that area, in the part of Iowa where our farm is at. I don't know why that makes any sense, to be honest with you, unless the overall numbers are low, because the preferred method of hunting in Iowa during this season is deer drives. So even if the deer aren't moving naturally, which was kind of what I was running into, it shouldn't make that much difference, because now they should be, with the hunters in the field pushing them, you don't need natural movement, you just need deer. So either it's a coincidence I've been talking to the wrong groups, or there's just an overall decline in deer numbers, which is possible, or possibly again, they're just not living in the places where people expect them. Maybe they're distributed, slightly different for whatever reason. But either way, apparently the gun hunting around here hasn't been super stellar either. So let's talk about what the next phase of behavior that we need to dig into. Really, there's a couple of things. There is a second rut, even in areas where the buck-to-doe ratio is on a healthy level. There's two reasons why you're going to run into a second rut. One reason is because you've got so many does that the bucks don't get them all bred during the first cycle, and then 28 days later they cycle back in again, the ones that weren't bred. Some areas, if the ratio is so messed up, you might even get 3 cycles, potentially, bucks breeding does, clear into January. But the other reason is more likely in areas with good herd distribution, or the good ratio, is the doe fawns are starting to come into estrus, and they'll come in roughly a month behind the adult does, which would put them, the 28 days is really what it is, I guess, but that would put them into this part of December. So if the normal breeding stage for the adult does is the 15th of November throughout most of the central United States and up into Canada, then the second cycle, whether it's fawns or adult does that weren't bred, would be about the 12th, somewhere in that neighborhood, when that cycle would peak of December. So we're looking at the ramp up potentially to a second rut. And I've seen some of that activity. Generally, it's kind of hard to hunt that, and we'll talk about that in the next section. But you will see the occasional, all-out chase and some serious fighting going on in this part of December. So let's take a break, then we'll come back and we'll talk about strategy. And we'll talk about a little bit more about just normal, typical behavior and feeding patterns in the early part of December. Hoyt's Bow Hunting Whitetails is brought to you by Redneck Blinds, Code of Silence Apparel, Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail, Fuse Accessories, Elevate Tree Stands, B3 Releases and Broadheads, and Hoyt. So as long as we're here, I thought I'd give you a really quick tour of the office. This is where I do most of my work when I'm not at the farm. And I talked on the Bow Hunting Whitetails episode about seeing deer out my back window. So this is my back window. So I've got a pretty cool view, and it's fun to look out there. Most evenings there'll be 6 or 8, always does, but 6 or 8 deer out there. And then, I've got my workstation behind me here. Let's see where that is. There we go. And then, of course, all the deer heads. I'll give you a quick look at the deer heads, and then we'll get back to the meat and potatoes of this Whitetail Watch episode. There's a lot of memories tied to these deer heads that you see on the wall. Some of them were killed by, most of them were killed by me. I think a couple of them by the kids, but Yeah, there's a lot of hours, days, weeks, months spent in tree stands and blinds to get these deer that are on the walls here. But thought you might get a kick out of it. We'll get right back to the discussion of what the deer are doing now. So the question then is, how do you hunt this second rut? You know, is there a method there that makes sense? My answer to that has always been I just hunt it the same way I hunt the late season deer in general, and that's just to focus on the food, and then hope to pick up a buck looking for a late estrus doe on the food source. Potentially you'll get the late estrus doe or the doe fawn coming out to feed, and then the buck's coming out to find them there. But in areas that don't have food sources, you still have an opportunity here. You just have to hunt back in the timber the same way that you would have, let's say, around the 10th or so of November. You got to be near the doe bedding areas, and you got to hope that there's a buck that's out there prowling around looking for that late doe. And it can happen. It's lower odds because now the firearm season is come and gone in most areas, so the deer are a lot more wary. They don't travel as well during daylight. It's going to be tougher to see that activity during normal legal shooting hours. But that's not to say that if you don't have food sources that you're out of the game. I would definitely encourage you to spend at least a little bit of time back in the timber near the doe bedding areas with the hope that there is a second estrus doe in that area. Otherwise, like I said, it's really all about the food, and we've been talking about that style of hunting now for a couple of weeks. So let's dive into that. Well, I'll go one step deeper and just say that I don't specifically hunt that second estrus cycle. I just hunt the food sources and expect that if there is a second estrus cycle, it's just going to make the action on the food a little bit better. I don't like going back into the timber this time of the season because they're so much more predictable coming out to the food generally. And usually I have food sources that I can hunt, so it doesn't make any sense to go into the timber and educate the deer near where they bed when, if I just give them some time and be patient, they're going to come out in the open, and I can hunt them there without putting quite as much pressure on them. So that's my philosophy for hunting the second rut, but that's also my philosophy for hunting the entire late season. So we're gonna repeat this same message probably at least one more time before I quit doing these whitetail watches for the year. I'll probably do one more, and after that they're going to get very repetitive because the message is going to be the same. The behavior hasn't changed. The only thing that's going to change is going to be the weather forecast, and and that's obviously a huge part of late season hunting. But we can cover that in one more episode. I don't need to come back every week and say, well, you got to hunt the food and here's the forecast. So let's just kind of leave it here. I would say the forecast doesn't look awesome for late season hunting, but it's not warm. It's just not frigid. Typically you like it to be really cold. So that's the second rut in a nutshell, and why I don't specifically hunt it, but how it does factor into deer behavior and potentially your strategy for this weekend ahead. And then I'll come back next week and I'll wrap this whole thing up by talking a little bit more about the hardcore late season hunting. What it takes to be successful after the second rut has come and gone, and there's nothing else really out there that's going to pull those deer onto their feet. That's when it gets down to serious business, and when you got to have the right setup. If you don't have the right setup, it just doesn't work. It's just really, really frustrating. So I'll talk about that next week. But I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you right back here another week for the next episode of the Whitetail Watch, produced by Hoyt's Bow Hunting Whitetails. And remember to always dream big.